the feeling of being valued. So if you feel valued, your culture will have a positive and strong culture within your squadron. And there's multiple ways to make sure to try and make an airman feel valued. And in a multi-generational workplace, those tactics do not always align to one solution fits them all. You're tuned in to the Breaking Red podcast, the show for rising military leaders who want to trailblaze the future. We tackle the profession of arms with creative solutions to dynamic issues. This isn't your typical leadership course, so be ready to step up your game and define the future. I am your host, Gabriel Gabe Roccavilla. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Breaking Red podcast. Gabe Rock here on the mic again. Very excited to record this episode. Had a great start of the morning, first off, because I was able to write down my thoughts after fresh off attending the 2019 Aerospace and Cyberspace Conference, at least for one day of the conference. I didn't go to all three, but had a good morning to kind of marinate on my thoughts for a while. Went on a walk with my wife and a dog. Normal morning thing. It's actually getting chilly here in the Maryland. I went outside without a hoodie and quickly realized I should have brought a hoodie. It's sort of funny just because we're coming from Alaska, my gauge of cold has been modified, but it's going to get, regulated to Maryland cold, and what that means back here in the lower 48. It always, how you feel with weather is going to be always dependent how you get normalized to your normal environment, so to your current environment. So cold will always become a relative thing, but for a Hawaii boy, stuff is always cold, so whatever. But yeah, so had a great morning and really excited to talk about day 2 of the conference. That was the one I was fortunate enough to attend. So this episode may potentially be longer than 20 minutes, but there's going to be a lot of things in here that day 2 seemed like there was a lot of important things. I was actually on leave on that day. I had use or lose leave that I had to burn, and so I was prompted by my buddy Rich Ziegler, from a fellow squadron commander at J-Bear. And he texted me. He was like, "Hey, did you go into the conference?" And it just reminded me, like, "Oh yeah, that is like 45 minutes away." So on my day off, decided to drive down to National Harbor. Never been there before, so went to the National Harbor to the Gaylord Convention Center, and it was amazing. That place is. I can see why the AFA chose to host the conference there. It is a great event center to host those kind of things, to the point where there were multiple conferences going along. And I went to another one. I attended the Society for, what is it called? Society for Compliance and Ethics. It was a different conference. It was a completely different vibe. And we went in there, and I didn't realize that kind of thing even existed. I think it was more, it seemed like if IG had a convention for them, this would have been it. But we just kind of went in there. Didn't even pay the conference fee, and no one was stopped us from walking in there. And so it was interesting just going there. But in any case, the convention center was amazing. It felt really good to be around a ton of airmen. Where I work at Fort Meade, it's a joint environment, and so anytime that I can get back and be surrounded by fellow airmen, I always enjoy that. And I hope that I'm going to be returning next year. Again, I was only able to attend one of the days of the 3-day event, and I know there's some follow-on things. They're not made for me, but I know there's like the Wing Commander Conference, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's just a large opportunity to go meet people and hear about things that is going on in the Air Force. So, and you could probably definitely find more official in-depth coverage about all of the panels and the overall event, but I'm going to only go over my thoughts on the stuff that I was able to attend. So it's only going to be on day 2, the Tuesday of the event. So here we go. So in the beginning, first panel, looking over the agenda, I attended the Demystifying the Multi-Domain Command and Control panel, which was really cool. It said multi-domain immediately as a comm guy. I was like, oh, clearly I have to go to this one. And panel was led by 3 gentlemen. One of them was Brigadier General Kumashiro. I was actually fortunate enough to work with his wife, Colonel Susie Kumashiro, when I was stationed at Davis-Monthan for a while, and so she helped set me on my path. So very, very fortunate path for leadership opportunities. Very fortunate to work with her, and but in any case, I recognize his name, and so interestingly, part of the panel started off by the panel admitting that multi-domain was in danger of becoming a buzzword, which is why the panel was needed, because people didn't really understand. We're still trying to grasp and define exactly what multi-domain operations mean, and then what does multi-domain command and control mean. And I think there was a quote that I wrote down. The goal of multi-domain C2 is unified command, distributed control, and decentralized execution. And I think that was a really smart attempt at defining what multi-domain C2 is. But then for the remainder of the panel, there's lots of recognition from the panel that MDC2 is hard to achieve, and yet there are dedicated teams working towards solutions, both within the Air Force, the joint community, as well as industry. But so everybody understands this is important, but I didn't get the feeling that anybody had any small wins that we could build positive momentum from. It was still like trying to drive the sense of urgency, which no one is necessarily debating. It's just a thing of how can we as the Air Force attach our day-to-day work to and contributing to multi-domain C2. I think that's connecting those dots is a lot easier said than done. Again, and you can actually find all of these videos as far as the panels. I believe they recorded them they're posting them on the YouTube Air Force Association page. If you happen to be listening to this podcast on YouTube, I'm going to embed the link below in the description, so you can check those out. So towards the end, it turned to a Q&A session where it was pretty smart. You could text, they put a phone number up on the screen. You can text your questions in there. So definitely easier and able to submit a bunch of questions, but also makes whoever's moderating the thing, someone's filtering them, right? If there's just a ton of questions being texted in, somebody has to filter them. So it's potentially your question. I had a question that I submitted that wasn't asked, but I'll go over that in a second. So you got all these deluge of questions, but I think it was interesting that almost all the questions were asking for how can we achieve the perfect multi-domain command and control environment. It's like, well, so in other words, like how do we enable a trusted 100%? And those are the key thing. They were looking for a 100% available, secure, and our word solution that can get us towards command and control. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that's just asking like, well, how do we get to the point where we end war forever? Like you're asking for a magical solution to a unsolvable answer. And so part of me was frustrated at that. And I started writing down my own thoughts as far as like, we shouldn't be looking towards technologies and solutions as the solution. What I wrote down was human decision and action is the most important element of multi-domain command and control. And that element can actually be 100% because we have control over our actions, 100% control over our actions, and we should be able to make those accordingly with the best informed decisions that we can make. So the responsibility of multi-domain command and control falls to leaders, not a system. There's nothing you can buy off the shelf, nothing you can program for. It is up to developing leaders who have the courage and the smarts to surround themselves with the right people and information to make a decision when it is needed. Warfighting is a mentality. It's not something we can build. And so I kind of got frustrated towards the end of that, during that Q&A session of that specific panel, but I wasn't necessarily surprised either. Everyone's trying to find they're trying to find where they can fit in, right? Or people are just saying, okay, we've been talking about multi-domain stuff for a while, so when are we going to get there? And so it's a general frustration or concern, maybe that's a better word, that if this is important, why are we still talking? I can't pin a feather on a win since we've been talking about this for the last several years. And so people want to get to that point. So I had my question I texted in, was not asked, but I'll share with you what my question was and the reason why. My question was, if we had to pick one to prioritize based on the lowest cost, either one, better situational awareness through an integrated network of smarter inputs and sensors. In other words, truly connecting our disparate service networks and data silos, which means breaking through embedded corporate fences. Or two, speeding up artificial intelligence assisted human decision-making models. And that was the first time I heard that, and I really, really like it. AI assisted human decision-making. So essentially, should we be focusing on, and what was the cheapest? Which one is cheaper? Which one of those two things is going to be cheaper? That way we can actually place energy behind that one because we don't live in the world where we have an infinity checkbook. So we have to pick something based on the resources we have available to us. Which one should be, and I was interested to hear what the panel was going to say as far as which one is going to be better? Just should we focus money and efforts towards building the integrated network in order to have to parse through all the actual data lakes that we have out there, or should we just dedicate resources to truly connecting artificial intelligence into human decision making? And I get it that one of them is they both are dependent on each other, but we have to pick, in my opinion, we have to pick one. And I would argue that we should probably pick the cheapest one. That way we can start to build those small wins that everybody is seeking out. Because if we don't have those small wins, people are not going to believe in the concept. Just like anything else that's new and upcoming. But when I was trying to flesh out better buy-in for mission defense team operations at my last squadron, at 673rd, I had to make sure we had some small wins, and because the squadron needed to believe in that, and I hope I did that. You have to ask members of the squadron whether or not I was successful or not, but that was my intent. It's like, go find the small wins, just get on base. You don't have to hit a home run every single time, but sometimes you just need to get on base, and the points will accumulate. Probably the only time I'll use a baseball analogy, because I'm not a huge fan of baseball. But the whole point from the MDC2 panel, and I believe they were really talking to industry, the whole point is to integrate with others to deliver effects. And if you're not coming to the table with the ability to easily integrate, you shouldn't be at the table. So that was kind of harkening back to my comment about data silos. If we're buying all these cool technologies off the shelf, yet these cool technologies aren't able to integrate with each other because of they're just proprietary information, right? And you can kind of see that specifically in the cyber world, even just for our cyber infrastructure stuff, some Cisco things don't necessarily play nice with Brocade equipment. And that for, like any other technology thing, they want you to purchase more things to be involved within their specific ecosystem, to the point where they can keep you as a repeat customer. The reality is that doesn't work as far as acquisitions wise. It's always going to be lowest cost government solution. What that means is you can potentially have a Frankenstein-like system that doesn't integrate with each other, and you buy all these things to try and make it easier, yet you're actually adding more work because the systems that you purchased are unable to talk to each other. So in order to get after multi-domain anything, C2 or operations, we have to start restructuring our architecture and infrastructure to support that goal. So, and that's way easier said than done. We don't have infinity checkbook. It takes years and years in order to try and make it's kind of like moving an aircraft carrier. It doesn't happen overnight. We have to dedicate time and effort smartly in order to try and deliver multi-domain. So I got a better sense of feeling from the panel of what C2 was. At least I have better words that I can use in order to repeat and concepts to kind of build off of. But inevitably, it took me a minute to figure out exactly what was the underlying frustrations and things that the audience was asking. So that's why I appreciated the Q&A piece, because now it finally brought to light for me we still don't have this locked down, but there are definitely some threads that were spoken that we can focus on. So always trying to find things that I can attach to, that way I can actually take action, not just intake information and not do anything with it. It's not going to be really worth anything. Second panel I was able to attend was the Air Force update. So this was at least for day 2 anyway. This is where General Goldfein was doing his first speaking event, and this place you could sense the energy was really excited. First off, they protected the Potomac AB conference hall like it was a movie premiere. So there was no peeking, no spoilers. Because people were trying to get in early. I could see it. There was a couple attendees. You can hear the music and all the production things going on. You're like, oh man, this is going to be like a concert almost. And then I saw someone open to the door, and this other guy came out. It's like, are you an attendee here? And the guy's like, yeah. It's like, okay, sorry, we're going to I'm going to have to close the door. You're not allowed to come in here. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to get an early peek as far as what's going on. I was like, yeah, I understand, but I'm going to have to close the door because you're not allowed to see anything in there. So I was really surprised at that. They had to do, reset the room for security reasons, and I'm sure that was probably necessary. I just wasn't prepared for the amount of like, no, for reals, you can't come in here until we have the room ready. So as soon as they did it, the place was packed, and Z and I went in there. We tried to go find a seat, and we weren't able to find a seat because it was packed. Standing room in the back. Everybody was putting jackets in chairs like you're at the movie theater. There was no reserve sitting like a regular movie theater. So I was like, it's just too much. So we ended up watching from the overflow room over in Potomac D. Way better. So pro tip, if you go to these conventions, one of these conferences, not everything needs to be seen live in person unless you want a chance to go take a pic. And clearly there are people trying to get in line or put themselves in a position to take a picture with General Goldfein or Chief Wright. So I totally understand that. But if you're not interested in that, just go to the overflow room. And to me, it's a whole thing of, unless you have a passionate reason why you need to see it in person, you don't have to. Kind of like going to like a live sports event, right? So you can go and you deal with the parking and the large ticket fee, the expensive ticket fee, your $18 Bud Light and your $30 hot dog or whatever you're going to buy. Or you can just watch the game at home, because HD coverage is amazing. If you have a 4K TV, that's amazing. I can pause it. I can use my own bathroom. I can just buy my own beer. That isn't an exorbitant amount cost. I get just as much satisfaction watching it there. So I was very happy and very much more comfortable watching it from the overflow room. So at the beginning of the General Goldfein's update, it was tracking to be like an hour-ish, and I was really looking forward to it, and it did not disappoint. So he started off with thanking the military spouses in the audience. And one thing I was trying to find, and I've been rewatching the video over and over, and I couldn't find the exact moment. So in relation to military spouse, General Goldfein mentioned something about the leadership triad. And then he said, the commander, the senior NCO of the squadron, and the lead spouse. And I remember my first reaction, I was like, wait, what? That's not the leadership triad. It is a leadership triad, definitely, but it is not necessarily the one that's hearing the lead spouse within that calculation was not something. And I think he said lead spouse. I don't think he said necessary key spouse, but it caught me off guard, because I was like, where did the first sergeant go? And we were joking around that, like, hey, so remember that time when you thought you're within the leadership the circle of trust? Yeah, you're out. So basically I need you to pack up your office and move out of here, because we're going to have the lead spouse come in here, and he or she is going to be the one that occupies his job. So we joked around about it. It was funny, not funny. I'm pretty sure if he did not mean it like that. I believe so anyway. And we started talking about how, the leadership team is actually bigger than a triad in general. So if we're going to go with, what I was used to hearing, the commander, the chief, and the first sergeant, is actually bigger than that, right? You should have a senior civilian within your squadron as part of that team, your DO, ops officer. There's more people within that leadership team that needs to be constantly talking to each other and shaping exactly where the squadron leads. And so it was funny, and we kind of said that, I was going to ask during the town hall. I don't know if I would have asked it. I probably wouldn't have asked it, but it would have been, hey, sir, so, now that the first sergeant is no longer part of the leadership triad, how do you think that affects first sergeant symposiums and the raising of this specific duty, a DSD kind of thing? Probably that I took my opportunity to shut up, and I did not ask that question, but it would have been kind of funny. But again, I don't believe he meant it like that. He was talking about a leadership triad, not the leadership triad. Moving on, General Goldfein talked about Gold Star families, and I've seen this more so in the Marine Corps culture, where this is not an issue for them. And so what he was mentioning was a Gold Star family member who came up to him and says, hey, Chief, don't let my son die twice. Once on the most horrific day of my life, and second, when you forget to say his name and forget his sacrifices that he gave for the country. So he highlighted, and the family was in attendance, Staff Sergeant Dylan Elchin. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. He was Special Tactics Combat Controller, killed in action 27 November 2018 by vehicle-borne IED in Afghanistan while serving in Operation Freedom Sentinel. I actually looked up some of his citation stuff and the awesome things this young man did. And so definitely, I think as an Air Force, I completely agree with the chief. We need to make sure that we say their name. We don't forget the sacrifices that our fellow airmen have made for us and the country. And it was really it was a good heartfelt moment, and I'm going to do my best to try and never forget as well. General Goldfein then went into kind of building the story as far as kind of continuing off of his the Air Force We Need update he previously has given. And so he talked about how, so he's the 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force, so he calls himself 21. So 21 is actually, what he's doing is working and building off of the previous chief of staff of the Air Force, and he mentioned the names. Well, we'll just say it was 20, 19, and 18. And so he's thinking about the Air Force we need in 2030. That is what the Chief of Staff of Air Force number 24 is going to employ. And so kind of bridging the gap as far as here's the additional context to the Air Force we need, and drawing it out that the stuff that he is building will be the force that the 24 Chief of Staff is going to be using. So he wants to make sure he's doing it correctly. So if I felt like he went into a little bit of update mode where he talked about, some of the high points on our overall journey to joint warfighting excellence. So he started talking about the first one was revitalizing the squadron. As a squadron commander, when I heard this, I was really excited, and I wanted to see exactly what kind of trust and authority was going to be pushed down to us as he kept on talking about, and how that manifested in reality. And it did to a larger extent, probably not the extent that we all hoped for, but any progress is better than no progress. What he talked about was putting our money where the mouth is, and he touted $70 million of squadron innovation funds being pushed down because he trusts command teams to get after the mission and take care of the people. And so that can't, instead of just saying those words, pushing down resources, specifically money, to squadron commanders for them to get after the issues that we knew we needed to take care of. So that still sounds really good. And when I heard about that, when I was first taking command, they're like, yeah, so you have, I want to say I had like 40 grand was specifically what I had for my squadron. And I was like, all right, cool. So then I get to use it how I want though, right? The way the chief explained, it's just, if I know what I need to use it on, I just get to use it. Well, that's not the reality. There's definitely a little bit, and then it turned to a lot of bit of, in my opinion, bureaucracy that didn't align with trust. Bureaucracy rarely aligns with trust. So at first, it was like, okay, you have a certain amount of money. You just have to tell me what you're using it for. And I understand the idea of we're going to consolidate the list of everybody's ideas. That way, if someone has a good idea, then you can replicate that idea within your squadron. And so I like that portion of it all. But then it became a thing of, hey, so you haven't updated what you're going to be using your money for. Look, I haven't decided yet. Well, you have to come up with your plan before because we need to start tracking the spending of it all. And immediately I was like, this is going to turn... I think we're going to ruin this. It's not going to turn it into it's not going to originally meet the intent the chief was saying, and inevitably it started kind of ratcheting down a little bit more as far as how the rules of engagement or how we need to do, to the point where it was almost like I need to ask permission. And I was like, I thought that's defeated the purpose. If leadership is saying they trust squadron command teams in order to make these decisions, spend the money how we want to, I should be able to spend the money. But the money, it's taxpayer money, and it always comes with strings attached. Regardless, it's not just like a blank check kind of thing of spend the 40K or whatever you want. There has to be some due diligence, which I assume when I was going to be spending it, I'd only spend it on things that I felt was not illegal, immoral, unethical, but I had to prove it. And if I was trying to spend the money a certain method, it still must be operated within the established rules, comptroller rules of what I can spend the money on and not spend the money on. So as General Goldfein talked about it being awesome and pushing money down to the squadrons, I don't believe that actually manifested in the reality he wanted it to be. Second part that he talked about was a story about what does it mean to be a bulldog. And it was a really cool story. I'm not going to summarize the entire thing, but what I took away was that it was a focus on the culture to determine the measure of a value an airman feels within the squadron. And that's a really good, important thing that all of us need to be focusing on, the feeling of being valued. So if you feel valued, your culture will have a positive and strong culture within your squadron. And there's multiple ways to make sure to try and make an airman feel valued. And in a multi-generational workplace, those tactics do not always align to one solution fits them all. But I'm going to say it out loud because I think a lot of people think that we can just peanut butter spread this one thing and everybody's going to feel valued. That's not how this works. So, if leadership is getting the culture right, answering that question should be really easy. What does it mean to be a communicator? What does it mean to be a bulldog? And if the person struggles to answer that question, that means they're not feeling valued, or they don't understand and feel part of the culture. So that's a opportunity. If the general or a leader is asking that question to a person within the unit, that's an opportunity as feedback to figure out, okay, so here's what can I do just to get this one airman to feel valued? And more than likely, there will be other people in that boat. But if you focus on that one airman, you're going to, positively affect 4 or 5. So, revitalizing the squadron overall was a good topic to cover. I just think that innovation funds, I said the word, IWORD funds is the area we have for more improvement. Went into joint leader development, and so you can see, especially on the officer side, you can see the talent management system needs to be aligned with our values as an organization. And so for me, within the next 2 weeks, I believe I'm going to be recategorized to a different kind of AFS specific communications, cyber operations, AFSC, but all of us are going underneath the information warfare competitive group. And I believe that's what the Wing Commander Conference is going to be talking about this week. And so it's really cool. You see it that we're making positive changes, whether I believe they're positive changes. I'm sure there are some people who are don't believe this is going to work, or they think that we sort of do this and we're just kind of doing a happy to glad change. I actually think most of these things are being done with purpose. And so he also went over the 4 criteria that he expects of all officers in NCO Corps and how to measure a successful leader, and how do you accomplish your mission, how do you lead airmen entrusted to your care, how do you manage resources to do your mission, and how have you improved your unit overall during the rating period, which all rides on a foundation of impeccable character. So I think an impeccable character, that specific phrase was spoken multiple times during his speech. So if you look up the definition of impeccable, it's the highest standards of character, faultless, and free from fault or blame, or flawless. So basically perfect character. So my first reaction was that, well, that's a really strong word, and it doesn't really leave room for mistakes. And so, and we should be in a environment, depending on where you're at, where you can actually have the freedom of maneuver to make mistakes, because that's how we're going to learn. But not all mistakes are going to be weighed the same. And I believe what he's actually was targeting was trying to eliminate toxic leadership. And so he's really talking about the core foundation of values that are unequivocally correct. You cannot make any of those mistakes. And I think that's true. If the civilians within our community see a uniform, they expect us to have impeccable character, and we should model ourselves after that. And I think that's a very great way to it took me a minute to figure out exactly what he meant or what he was targeting, but I believe that's what he was talking about, trying to eliminate toxic leadership and do not accept any behavior that is in that direction. And to summarize on that piece, he said that the focus on joint leadership development is because we're raising our replacements. And so if we're going to keep on developing the Air Force we need, that we need to raise the replacements we need as well. So overall, I think that the intent is moving in the right direction for joint leadership development. He also hit on multi-domain operations, and he told the story about how when he went in and started talking about it, and he asked, all right, who around here is going to be my lead for the integrator to integrate multi-domain operations? Nobody knew how to answer him, and then he slowly realized, oh wait, I'm that guy. And so if I'm the guy as a chief of staff, this cannot work, because there has to be somebody else. I need more people around me within the team in order to get after this problem. I highly recommend you go find the video and watch it, because there is a great video and a simple explanation as far as what multi-domain operations actually means, because we can't get it unless we understand exactly what the terms and phrases we're going to be using. It's hard for us to kind of attach to it. So highly recommend watching the video. My takeaway from my summary was that multi-domain operations involves using one domain to influence another to produce multiple dilemmas for the enemy and improve overall deterrence. So, when you think about national defense strategies, joint environments, everything that goes along with the reasoning behind a strong war Air Force, I understood it now. It was just a really good vignette to kind of walk through, that's actually what multi-domain operations is supposed to look like. So part of the requirements in order to enable that is a fully networked force that is secure and has both secure and R-word info. So yes, I think that's an inherent assumption that needs to be there, which is what he keeps on. If you reference back my previous things about the multi-domain command and control, but that's really, really hard to achieve. It's not magical. It can be done, but it's not magical, and nor is it overnight. It also involves multi-domain operations involves simultaneous maneuver. I wrote down, we must understand other surface capabilities to employ in a unified manner. And he talked about how the CFAC is uniquely qualified in order to do this function. So I agree. It's definitely a thing of I've seen within the Air Operations Center. I can see how the integration of everything works, and you have liaison officers, and you have people who are part of that team. I personally believe that every airman should have a tour in AOC because I just think gives you a better appreciation as far as how we conduct war and battle. But that's a great example as far as so you have everything integrated into one team because you have to have coordinated effects and unity of effort in order to make our job work. So and he talked about being more network centric versus platform centric in advanced battle management. So what he was really getting into is we need to be able to connect. We need to connect the dots between all of the information and all of the things that are going along that deal with the facets of war. That way, leadership can make informed decisions and provide a multitude of options to our civilian government, to our civilian leadership, so that we can figure out how to deter war accordingly, or if need be, win a war. And he made several comments that if tasked today, we would win a war. I believe in that, and but that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. He talked about fledgling, the Space Force, and he quoted, there is no space war, there's just war, but we need to dominate space, and the Air Force is going to be pivotal in leading that effort. I agree with that as well. Talked a little bit about information warfare, and there was a separate panel. I wasn't there for it with the establishment of the 16th Air Force, so I'm probably going to do a future episode just on that whole thing. So it's the merging of the 24th and 25th Air Force, A26 now, and for our leadership elements anyway. And then it's going to become. I need to learn more about exactly where this is going for the force. It's exciting. I think it's a great alignment of what we do as far as the cyber operations anyway. And I'm happy and excited to contribute to that in the future. So he ended that portion of his of the Air Force update, kind of circling back to what does it mean to be a bulldog, and he kind of elevated to what does it mean to be an airman, and he believed 6 parts to the answer. Are you part of something bigger? In other words, are you part of something bigger than yourself? Take your oath seriously and preserve democracy. Number 2 was, are you passionate to own the higher ground? 3, impeccable character. 4, understand what we value. 5, leadership is a gift given to those who follow. That was a really good quote. I'll probably have to do something about just that quote itself. And then 6, never forget. And he ended the entire event ended on the "We Remember" song. So overall, it was an awesome event. I was really, really happy I was there to witness the panel, and it's going to give me more and more information that I need to just kind of marinate on and figure out how I can contribute to the overall challenges that he's setting out in front of us. After that, grabbed some lunch, and then it just made it talking and meeting up with people. So the other benefit of going to the conference is just seeing old colleagues. And I saw some people. I might have a roll call at the end of the episode of all the people that I ran into. I didn't run into enough of them. I know there are definitely people who were there, previous teammates or people that I just wanted to meet in person and introduce myself. But it was cool. And so the last event that I went to was the Air Force Town Hall. So I was excited for this one because here's the reason why, and then I'll tell you exactly why I believe I was let down. When I hear the topic or the title of town hall, I'm imagining kind of like where you have 2 open mics, and then you have lines behind those mics, and people just kind of walk up and they ask a question, and then the panel has to be prepared for anything that are going to be asked. So they're not scripted. You might have some scripted questions in there. Nothing wrong with that, a little bit of strategery. But you also need to be prepared to answer some left field question. You may or may not be prepared and have all the information in front of you. And I really wanted to see, because it's rare when you get to have the audience to talk to the chief of staff or the chief master sergeant of the Air Force and ask them a question with 10,000 of your closest friends next to you. So I was really hyped for it. The town hall did not run like that. Remember earlier I mentioned how I said during the multi-domain panel that you can text. There's a phone number posted up on the screen, and you could text in your questions. That wasn't presented. And I can see everybody. You can see both the moderator and the panel physically flipping over pieces of paper and looking. You can see eyes looking down at talking points to make sure they were essentially staying on script. So it was a scripted town hall. So if you're going to do that, it's fine. Just don't call it a town hall. Call it something else. My overall impression is that the event felt like a safe choice. It felt safe versus having an opportunity to have real feedback from our leadership. So it wasn't necessarily invaluable, because there's definitely some bright spots, and I'll talk about those. But if you're paying attention to most of the updates that the Air Force has been doing as far as the current issues, you didn't miss anything, because we've already been talking about this. So we talked about housing issues, the whole thing as far as, doing the surveys, 100% accountability of our housing and getting feedback. We talked about that. We talked about access to mental health care. We talked about the idea of reimbursements for dependents on to get certifications. And so all of those things are already in the news. And so they just kind of regurgitated the talking points as far as what has already been said. So that I started getting that feeling, and then I started to get let down. But it doesn't, regardless of that, there was some bright spots. So some of the bright spots they talked about was really going after toxic leadership. And basically trying to, we had the tactical resiliency pause day, and why it's important to focus on ourselves and to become a better Air Force. And the two things that were highlighted is that we still have toxic leadership as a problem, and then we have helping agencies that aren't really helping people. And there's a two-way. I'm not going to, by no means am I trying to blame all the helping agencies. I was working on a task force at my last base trying to understand how to improve helping agencies getting out to the community and stuff like that. And it's a tough challenge. Sometimes you have competing helping agencies, and we ended up having Task Force True North at my base at JBEAR, and the entire thing and we were a beta testing base, to the point where the program was being rolled out, it was almost like, we have to make this work. I'm like, I don't have to make this work. Why do I need to make this work? It's like, well, we want to make sure that these resources and the things we're trying to prove as far as embedding mental health technicians and social workers into a squadron is the correct solution. I was like, well, okay, so if my airman has an issue, they could go to those resources embedded in the squadron, right? Yes, but they could also go to the chaplain if they wanted to. Well, yeah, they could also go to mental health if they wanted to. Yes. But they're trying to figure out, it was weird. They started creating kind of like these unwritten things of like, but we want them to go to these people first. In other words, to make the program better. And my feedback was like, I don't know. I'm not going to kind of fluff up the numbers just to make this program look good. My job as commander is to make sure airmen have access to anything that fits their bill. So if they feel more comfortable going to a chaplain versus a social worker in the squadron because they have to walk to that person's office, I should not highly recommend they go into one door versus the other. The important piece is that they get help regardless of where it's coming from. So those are kind of things that I think are while the intent is good, the actual execution is terrible. And so but toxic leadership and helping agencies that aren't really helping, they continue to be addressed to lower self-destructive behavior. And I think that's an appropriate term. A lot of people will say to try and prevent suicides. So suicides is, and I'm not by no means am I a psychologist or am I qualified to make these statements. I'm just giving you my opinion. Suicide is the most extreme side of the range of self-destructive behavior. But I can't just say we shouldn't only be focusing on minimizing suicidal behavior. We should be minimizing self-destructive behavior. Even if you're just stressed out, I want you to have the resources available to you where you can go and talk to someone and eventually empower yourself to deal with your own stress. But I don't want to just target, kind of going back to my whole don't be an hashtag DBA, don't be an asshole. I'm not talking about symptoms. Suicide and suicidal ideations of behavior and domestic violence and drug use, alcohol abuse, all of those things are symptoms of an asshole. Because if you weren't an asshole, you wouldn't do those things. And so, and also if you can't be a toxic leader, how am I going to say this? Only toxic leaders are assholes. There we go. That's the easiest way for me to try and articulate it. So hashtag DBA, that's what we're really trying to focus on. Out in my summary, that's what one bright spot of the town hall was. The other piece, they started talking about PT. And so fitness stuff is a huge thing for me. So two parts of it. There was a scripted question was, can you talk to Chief Wright? And he talked about what are some upcoming potential changes to the PT test. And so I saw he had some notes or some, I believe he had some talking points he needed to cover. And so he talked about how like there's a potential change to where, I don't know what the official answer is going to be, but like your AC measurement, your waist measurement can be taken at a different time when you do your physically running and when you're running and doing push-ups, sit-ups. Sure, I guess that's a cool thing. But he was like, then he started saying, I don't know why we're talking about this. We really need to spend more time talking about things that matter, like living a healthy lifestyle than the test itself. So he said it really, his response kind of switched a little bit as far as like, why are we talking about the PT test? And it almost sounded like I got this feeling of Allen Iverson when he got interviewed, and then his response of like, we're talking about practice. We're talking about something stupid. The PT test is not the important thing to be concerned about. We need to be talking about healthy lifestyles. And again, a healthy physical lifestyle is a positive contributor to not being an asshole, to minimizing self-destructive behavior. If you have a prioritized healthy lifestyle, you don't have room for all the bullshit of doing stupid shit. So you just can't do it. And I really wish I saw, and I'm sure there was, if you asked him, when he wasn't on stage, whatever it was, he would give you his real answer. And I thought it was going to happen, but it seemed like to not completely divert from the town hall and the script itself, he kept his comments short. So I was hoping to hear more, but he didn't go into more. And then the second one was where General Goldfein talked about how he announced he's going to be running the Air Force Half Marathon at Wright Pat, and then he's going to publish some new fitness standards for squadron commanders. So it sounds really interesting. And we were talking a little bit about that at the squadron commanders and that I previously served with and the ones I'm serving now. And here's my view of what this new published fitness standard should look like. It should be a sticky note, and it should be one sentence on it. Dear Squadron Commander, if you fail your PT test, you're fired. Signed, 21. That's it. That if that's inevitably what this new fitness standard, whatever it's going to be published, says, it's. I'm glad it's being written down, but it's at the same time it's kind of sad that we need to write it down. Why? If you're select for Squadron Command, in addition to impeccable behavior, you have higher standards applied to you. I don't care on your personal opinions of that. That's just the reality of that. One of those is if you fail your PT test, 74.9 or below, you're going to be relieved of command. That's it. You're done. There's too many second and third. I've seen it at bases where a squadron commander fails and then nothing happens to him or her. Nothing. That they continue to serve in command, and probably because someone's trying to take care of him or her or whatever it is. And it's just, and I'm sure that there could be reasons. I personally do not care. And the second, third order effects is you have the entire enlisted force now have to explain, specifically your frontline NCOs have to explain to their airmen, why is the commander, something happened to him or her, they failed the PT test and nothing happened to them. They don't even get like nothing happens. He or she's a commander. In my opinion, the Chief's new fitness standards for commanders should just be that. If you fail, you're fired and you're done. I'm not saying kick you out of the Air Force by any means. I'm just saying you're relieved of command. And because we're talking about minimum standards, just get a damn 76 and move on. There shouldn't be a reason why you can't. Even if you have certain components you're exempt from, I don't care. Just get a 76 and don't embarrass. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing me as a previous squadron commander or as a serving squadron commander. I get lumped in with you. And so just don't embarrass me and don't be an asshole. Just pass your damn PT test. So that was the last event that I attended that day. Ended up just having some adult beverages with some of my friends that to end the day before I went home safely, obviously. But it was a great event. I'm glad that Z nudged me a little bit and said, hey man, you want to go? It's like, oh yeah, I totally want to go. And even the 45-minute drive in the DMV area around the DC area wasn't enough to just make me not want to go. So very, very happy that I went up for that day. I'm going to spend some time watching the other panels because there's a lot of other things I need to keep up with. General Goldfein talked about he wanted this event to be the #1 professional development event for the force. And I believe so. Like if you're not paying attention to these things, every everyone in the Air Force will find something, and potentially their family members. You will find something within this conference that applies to you. At minimum, either you're going to get an update you wanted to hear, or you're going to be frustrated that you're not getting the update you want to hear. Regardless, you need to find your space in order to what actions are you going to take. So I'm going to continue to remain professionally critical of the things that I hear. You can kind of, what I talked about over the duration of this podcast episode is like, there's definitely stuff that I'm excited about, stuff that still weren't answered, but I want to help. Regardless of the things that are going on, I am going to help define the future, what I can do anyway. If our community the Breaking Red community wants to figure out how we can do it together, by all means we should, because we could probably deliver more effects as a team. And because we don't have all the solutions, but we can figure it out. I don't have to be right. I just need to get it right. Now, my previous wing commander said that, and that kind of resonates with me. So there was also just the awesome opportunity to see previous teammates that I've served with. So I mentioned before, here's the roll call. So from Holloman, I saw Karen Kirkpatrick and Michael Modron. From JBear, I saw Rich Ziegler, Jim Atchley, Teona Enriquez, Brad Quam, Mike Venning, Andrea Dimmick, and Eric Moyal, who hooked me up with a breakfast sandwich from the Best Buns restaurant that had enough calories for the entire 3-day conference, but it was totally well worth it. And all those teammates from JBear. So it was really awesome to walk around and just kind of reunite, share some hugs, taking some pictures, and I'm laughing and getting excited again about and getting reblued, to be honest. The event left me with, I have more work to do. I need to find my place and contribute to help define the future, because I think leadership is challenging us, and so we need to all get to work. So overall, the conference was a great event. I hope to attend this one and more like them in the future, and highly recommend everybody, take time to see what a leadership is talking about, and don't just take certain sound bites and just kind of run off on that. Watch and listen and read the entire thing. That way you can understand your narrative and make up your own minds. By all means, I'm sure people will disagree with what I'm talking about, and I hope that I can communicate with these people, because there could be potentially things I don't understand or I need to get educated on. So I want to take advantage that I don't know everything, but I do want to seek to understand. So that's going to conclude this episode. Like I said, ran a little bit longer, but a lot of good stuff going on, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace. This is Gabe Brock, and thanks for tuning into the Breaking Red podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review so we can improve our work and deliver the best content possible. You can find our community platforms on Facebook and YouTube by searching for Breaking Red Podcast. Keep up with weekly content at our website, projectrise.co, and you can find me on Instagram at GabeBrock01. Like, follow, and share Breaking Red podcast content everywhere possible, both the good and the bad. Join our conversations with other rising military leaders that aren't afraid to break red and learn how to rise to your potential.